Good afternoon. Welcome to Sports Nothing But Sports with Kent Sterling for Friday, January 17th, 2020. Brought to you by the great people at Today's Dentistry. Dr. Mike O'Neill is the best dentist that there is. He's been my dentist exclusively for the last 26 years. You can call him and make him your dentist. 317-849-2933 is the best at what he does. It's that simple. Another guy who's the best at what he does is Harry. He asks the questions most Fridays up at Will's Northwoods Inn on North Racine in Chicago, just north of Nelson Street, about 5 blocks south of Wrigley Field. How you doing, Harry?
Oh, I couldn't be better. It's one of those days. It's Christmassy up here. Getting a little bit of snow. It has started to snow. Winter storm calamity in the city of Chicago. But it's always warm as hell right here in my cockles. I've got warm cockles, isn't that right, Dutchie? You bet your sweet ass I do. At any rate, what I meant to say is it's always warm here at Will's, drinking gin. And what is that? Gin and White Claw up here. Tastes like Christmas at Will's Northwoods Inn. At any rate, let's start the extravaganza of questions. Here's number one, Ganoret. Does Indiana face a must-win game tomorrow at Nebraska?
You know, if Indiana loses this one, here's the deal with Indiana playing Nebraska. Normally this early in the year, it's going to be January 18th. You're not going to say that anything is a must-win, right? You're on the road. It's hard to win on the road. Even at Nebraska, it's hard to win on the road. But the next 8 games, here they are. Indiana will play Michigan State, Maryland, both those games at home. Then they are at Penn State and at Ohio State. Then they come back home for 2 against Purdue and Iowa. Then they're on the road again at Michigan and at the Barn in Minnesota. Those are the 8 games. They will be favored, according to Ken Pom, in 2 of those games by a total of 3%, okay? And those games are at home against Purdue and at home against Iowa. The total they're being favored in those 2 games right now as it stands, like I said, 3%. So if you lose to Nebraska, you've got a real uphill climb. You got to win. If you lose to Nebraska and you fall to 3-4 in the Big Ten, number one, it's a bad loss because Nebraska right now in the Ken Pom rankings, 133rd in the country. Number 2, you're looking at 8 games coming up that could all be losses. If you win 2 of those games, if you win 3, that's kind of a victory. So if you can get to 3-4, and then over the next 8, you go, let's say 3-5, you're still in the game to get to 10-10 and get to the NCAA tournament. Not that 10 wins is an automatic magical elixir to get you to the NCAA tournament. So if you lose this game, you really put yourself behind the 8 ball for the next 8. And if you can't beat Nebraska, even at Nebraska, what the hell are you doing with all these games coming up, right? Indiana's got problems. Indiana's loss at Rutgers, you know what? It was foreseeable. Everybody has lost this year at Rutgers so far. Rutgers is 11-0 at home. It's hard to beat Rutgers at home. But it was it was how Indiana looked in losing. And that's the problem with Indiana. Because the way they look when they lose, hell, the way they look when they win, it's not altogether good. The ball movement gets stagnant. The defense is rarely connected. They don't shoot the ball very well. They're hitting under 30% from beyond the arc. There are a lot of problems with Indiana basketball. But a win tomorrow, and then you win 3 of the next 5 somehow, some way, that gives you 7 wins total in the Big Ten as you look ahead to a period of the schedule where things don't get easy. But the last 2 games are at Assembly Hall this regular season against Wisconsin and Minnesota, and you could win both those games. So it's like, okay, before you get to the last 2, if you can get to 8, you got a chance.
It sounds like you're trying to talk yourself into feeling good about these Hoosiers. Archie Miller's 3rd team for the Hoosiers. Let me skip ahead to this was going to be another question. We'll call it number 2 for the sake of continuity. What's the problem with IU?
I think the root problem for Indiana is a lack of experience. According to Ken Pom again, Indiana has 1.38 average years of experience on the floor at any given time. That ranks 279th in Division I basketball, 353 Division I basketball teams. Only Maryland and Northwestern have less experience on the floor at any given time than Indiana. You got to get old and stay old. Coaches say it year after year after year. If you got seniors, baby, you got a chance. Butler, senior laden. They got seniors, they got juniors. Indiana, right now, what do they got? They got some juniors, they got some sophomores, they got a couple of good freshmen. They're just not old enough to win critically important games. As you get older, you get more travel tested, you get tougher. You realize that the clock is ticking, that playing college basketball and going to college, as a matter of fact, is a little bit like a microcosm for life. As you get to year 3 and then into year 4, you hear kind of the clock ticking loudly in your head, and you realize that you only have so many games left, so many opportunities to play that great game for your university. Indiana doesn't have a lot of guys at this point who are hearing that clock tick. And that's a problem for Indiana. And the two guys who do hear the clock ticking, those are Deron Davis and Devontae Green. And those guys don't show up every day. That's a problem. You got bad senior leadership and you've got bad senior play to this point. It is really hard to win with those two things.
Number 3, does it bother you that no one nationally is talking about the Indiana Pacers?
You know, the Pacers, they're in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. They've won 26 games. They're 26-15. They're going to play Minnesota tonight at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. They're going to win that game. So they're going to go to 27-15, 42 games in. And then they got a 5-game road trip. 2 of the games really, really tough right out of the gate. They got Denver and then they got Utah. Then they traveled to some places where they ought to be able to win. Phoenix, Golden State, and Portland, all with losing records. So anyway, to answer your question, it doesn't bother me at all. I hope nobody nationally talks about the Indiana Pacers, because here's what drives conversation nationally: controversy, bad behavior. That's what people want to talk about. You watch Get Up every morning on ESPN, and what do you hear? Odell Beckham Jr. this, Antonio Brown that. All right, that's what you hear. When guys step out of line, these guys talk about it, the national heads. They talk about you then. The Pacers, look at what's gone on in Indianapolis, all right? I was listening to the Dan Dockett show a little bit earlier today, and Dan and Kevin Bowen were talking about how these franchises locally, when was the last time you read about the Colts or the Pacers getting into a dust-up in a bar, or, you know, getting arrested by police, or being kicked off the team for something nefarious? It almost never happens. I remember the backup running back at Anderson University during training camp, where he got run out because of some ridiculousness. Other guys didn't. They engaged in the same stuff, but this guy was toward the end of the roster, right? So, yeah, they told him to pack his bags. They didn't tell everybody who was involved to pack their bags, but let that be a lesson to you kids. If you're really, really talented, you get a longer leash. If you are not that important to the organization, kapow, you're gone. All right, so that's how life works. In sports, like I said, a microcosm of life. The Pacers and the Colts, we don't hear a lot of bad behavior or any from those two teams. And because of that, you don't see them a lot on the national outlets. And I think that that's a cool deal. Good for Kevin Pritchard and good for Chris Ballard for building a team and building two teams. Both built their own teams kind of in their own image. They aren't going to have problems. These are guys who do not like drama. And so there's no drama with these teams. And as a result, they're just left to focus on the task at hand. And the Pacers, you know what? Their task has been winning games. They've won 26 through 41. They're going to win a 27th tonight. They're going to, at some point, move into 4th place in the Eastern Conference at the end of the Western Conference swing that they're going to go on beginning this weekend. Victor Oladipo coming back on January 29th. And when Oladipo comes back, this team suddenly is going to become whole. And once they learn how to play together, Oladipo with the guys and the guys with Oladipo, all of a sudden, the Pacers are going to be plus an all-star, where other teams, they are going to be stagnant in their roster. Now, nobody's catching the Bucks in the regular season, but there's no reason that with Victor Oladipo a part of this team on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively, remember, Victor Oladipo, a really good defensive basketball player, better defensive basketball player, maybe than an offensive basketball player, certainly better than Jeremy Lamb, who's going to move to the second unit and be a very sweet component for that second unit. But with Oladipo as part of the first, the Pacers going to get better, and they're going to get better quick. And it would not surprise me to see them finish in fourth, third, or even second in the Eastern Conference at the end of the regular season.
All right, number 4. What is Bobby Cox's legacy? Why the hell are we talking about the old Atlanta Braves coach on this Friday afternoon? Did he die? How's he in the news?
No. Harry, that's Bobby Cox, the commissioner of the IHSAA. It's not the Hall of Fame baseball coach, Bobby Cox. Bobby Cox's legacy of high school athletics, it's not about not allowing kids to transfer, and it's not about what happened in Griffith with the brawl and all of that stuff. All of that stuff is collateral. All of that stuff made headlines, but that's not the legacy of Bobby Cox as the commissioner of the IHSAA. It's just like Fred Glass's legacy at Indiana as the outgoing athletic director. It's not about the wins and losses and going to bowls or going to the NCAA tournament or Big Ten championships or, 24 sports, one team, all of that stuff. It's about the student athletes. All right, Bobby Cox's legacy lies in every single kid who played varsity sports at all the high schools throughout the state of Indiana who are IHSAA members. That's it. That's what you do. That's why you have that job. That's why you go to work. Because you want to make things better for a whole bunch of kids who work really, really hard to play sports. And you want to put them in a position where they can extract the life lessons that are available to them through playing sports. And that's what Bobby Cox has done. That's the legacy. All those kids for the last decade or so that Bobby Cox has been the commissioner of the IHSAA, that legacy is in those kids. All of his work into those kids. Those kids might not realize it. They might not even know who Bobby Cox is. They probably have never met him. But his imprint is on all of them, and that is the legacy of a commissioner of an organization like the IHSAA.
I'm glad you cleared that up. I almost dropped to my knees and said a Hail Mary in memory of the great Bobby Cox. What a name. Hey, Bob Cox. It's fun to say, isn't it, Dutchie? Nod your head, yes. And another Hocker short glass of gin and White Claw for Dutchie, if you please. All right. Number 5, should Shoeless Joe Jackson be voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame? What the hell are we doing talking about Shoeless Joe? He hadn't played for 100 years, and hell, he's been dead for 70.
Harry, here's the deal. Shoeless Joe Jackson is not on the ineligible list any longer. That's the thing. And so let me tell you why that's important, because being placed on the ineligible list made you ineligible to be inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame. But now baseball has said that once a player dies, he's no longer on the ineligible list because he is ineligible by default through his death. So he doesn't need to be on the ineligible list anymore. That removes Shoeless Joe Jackson from the ineligible list and puts him back on the list of players conditionally, I guess, or potentially for membership in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Shoeless Joe Jackson is a baseball player in 13 seasons playing for the Cleveland Indians and Chicago White Sox, was a superior player and one of the best hitters of all time, a career average of .356, third all-time in baseball history. Listen to this. He struck out 24 times in his final 1,248 plate appearances. He was banned from baseball at age 33 after one of his best seasons. So his quantitative statistics, you can't even really, you can't extrapolate what those are or evaluate what those are, because we don't know what he would have done years 33 through 38 or 39. And that was generally the age at which a baseball player retired during that era if they were as good as Joe Jackson was. Joe Jackson the quality of his play should land him in the Hall of Fame. Membership as one of the members of the Black Sox, the 8 guys who allegedly threw the 1919 World Series to the Cincinnati Reds while members of the Chicago White Sox, you know what, that might disqualify him in the minds of many. But he hit .375 in that World Series. He did nothing on the field that would overtly show that he was any party to that throwing of the series. All right, Charlie Comiskey, I'm not going to get into all of it, but Charlie Comiskey, the owner of the White Sox, very, very stingy, and the players were tired of it. They were the best team in baseball, and they thought, we got to get paid somehow, some way. So some of these guys, Happy Felsch and Eddie Seacott and Lefty Williams and Buck Weaver are alleged, along with Shoeless Joe Jackson, to have thrown the World Series. Chick Andel, another one of those guys. And you know what? I think at some point you say, let bygones be bygones. There's no real evidence that shows that Jackson was a party to the nefariousness of that team. I say yes, he should be in the World Series. Harry, thank you for asking so many good questions. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy Friday up there at Will's Northwoods Inn on the north side of Chicago.
Hey, I want to ask you one more, maybe a bonus question, huh? Radio in Indianapolis this week dealt a blow with the termination, the downsizing of iHeart that led to the Query Schultz show no longer being on WNDE. There's a petition and there are rumors that those guys might be coming back. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are this. You know what? In Des Moines, they brought a show back. iHeart did. After they fired the guys who host the show, they brought that show back. So obviously, they're kind of reorganizing their thoughts and trying to figure out what the hell they should do with some of these people that maybe were prematurely fired. The petition isn't going to have any kind of sway whatsoever on what iHeart does. But maybe iHeart's going to look at the expense and the revenue and decide that Query and Schultz should come back because really from a financial standpoint, they aren't just an expense. They also are responsible for revenue that came to iHeart through Indianapolis. And so there might be kind of a rethinking of what happened with Query and Schultz, and that could actually happen. We've seen it happen, like I said, in Des Moines. It may happen in Indianapolis. It may happen in other markets. This may have been premature, and you know what? Clear Channel and iHeart, they're the same. Clear Channel became iHeart as they kind of redefined themselves as a digital marketplace rather than just radio. Anyway, they are leaving themselves a little bit of wiggle room to remake decisions, and maybe Query and Schultz are going to be among them. I hope that they are, because those are two guys who work hard at doing what they do. Jake and Derek are good people. They're smart people, and the more local radio in Indianapolis, the better for Indianapolis radio. And so I really hope that those guys do come back. We'll see what iHeart does. Thank you again, Harry. Please enjoy the rest of your Friday. To you listening, have a great weekend. My God, the Marion County basketball tournament, the semifinals tonight being held at Southport. 4 great teams. You've got Lawrence North and Ben Davis. You've got Pike and Lawrence Central. The finals tomorrow night, going to be spectacular. Tomorrow afternoon, 1 o'clock. Butler is where Harry's at. In Chicago to play against the DePaul Blue Demons. You have Purdue playing at 2 o'clock. They are going to play at Maryland. Maryland, one of the younger teams in the Big Ten, like we said. Maybe Purdue can pull the road upset. Then at 7 o'clock, Indiana is at Nebraska. We'll see what happens with the Hoosiers. I think they absolutely need a win tonight. Pacers, Timberwolves at Bankers Life Fieldhouse, and then the AFC and NFC championship games on Sunday. Those are going to be 2 high-quality games. Tennessee at Kansas City. I think Kansas City wins that thing in a walk. I think it's going to be a blowout, to tell you the truth. I know a lot of people are picking Tennessee as an upset special. I do not believe that that's going to come to pass. I think Kansas City wins and they cover. Then you've got the Packers at San Francisco. I think the 49ers win that game. I'm not convinced they're going to cover the 7.5. Aaron Rodgers on the other side of the ball. You got to take him into account. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Monday morning, breakfast with Ken at 8 o'clock sharp on Facebook Live, and then right after that on Periscope Live, which is also available, of course, on Twitter. Cannot wait to talk to you on Monday. Brought to you by the great people, as always, from Today's Dentistry. Call them 317-849-2933. Join me Monday morning.